So, I had this conversation with a friend last week that completely rewired how I think about something.
Oh, here we go.
No, listen, she's been doing this whole optimization thing, cold plunges at 5 in the morning, strict elimination diet, tracking every minute of her sleep, scheduling her days down to 15-minute blocks, and she looked exhausted, like genuinely worse than when she started.
The wellness industrial complex strikes again.
But here's what got me. I said, maybe you're doing too much. And she said, no, I'm just not doing it right yet. And that phrase, not doing it right yet, it hit me that she'd never once considered the possibility that the problem wasn't technique. The problem was excess.
And that connects directly to what we're exploring today.
Exactly. Welcome to Ab Immemorabili. I'm Holly.
I'm Drake, from Time Beyond Memory. We're part of the most ancient anamnetic order of Trikala, where students work through 15 wisdom traditions over a lifetime of study and application. Philosophy, psychological tools, embodied practice, all integrated.
And today we're looking at Aristotle, specifically his doctrine of the mean from the Nicomachean Ethics. Because almost everyone gets this wrong.
They really do. People hear golden mean and think it means everything in moderation. Take it easy. Don't rock the boat. Be tepid about everything.
And Aristotle would have found that reading absolutely maddening.
Because what he actually taught was something far more demanding and far more interesting.
So let's get the misunderstanding out of the way first. Aristotle was not teaching moderation.
Right. He was teaching excellence. The Greek word is arete, and it means something closer to functioning at the highest level of what you can be. A knife has arete when it cuts brilliantly. A horse has arete when it runs magnificently. A person has arete when they live with full excellence of character.
And excellence, Aristotle noticed, always sits between two failures. You can fail by doing too much, or you can fail by doing too little. Virtue is the sweet spot, but it's not the lazy middle.
Think about courage. Aristotle says courage sits between two extremes. On one side, cowardice. You feel fear and you collapse. On the other, recklessness. You feel no appropriate fear at all, and you charge into danger stupidly.
And the courageous person isn't someone who feels moderate fear. They're someone who feels the right amount of fear at the right time, about the right things, and acts appropriately despite it.
That qualifier. The right amount, at the right time, about the right things, toward the right person, in the right way. This isn't a formula you can apply mechanically. It requires something much harder.
Judgment.
Exactly. And Aristotle had a specific term for this kind of judgment. Phronesis. Practical wisdom.
Which might be the most underrated concept in the entire Western philosophical tradition.
I'd argue it is. Because Aristotle is saying something radical here. He's saying you cannot be a good person by following rules. You can only be a good person by developing the wisdom to see what each unique situation actually requires.
And that's completely different from how most people think about ethics. We want the rules. Tell me what's right and what's wrong. Give me the list.
And Aristotle says no. There is no list. There can't be one. Because the right action depends on who you are, what situation you're in, who you're dealing with, and what's actually at stake.
Let's make this concrete with some of his specific examples, because the man was brilliant at illustrations.
Take generosity. Aristotle says generosity is the mean between two extremes. Prodigality, which is giving too much or too recklessly, and stinginess, which is giving too little or clinging too tightly.
But here's where it gets interesting. The mean isn't the same for everyone. A wealthy person and a person of modest means will have different points of appropriate generosity. For someone earning very little, giving away half their income isn't generous, it's reckless. For someone with enormous wealth, giving away the same percentage might actually be stingy.
The mean is relative to us. That's Aristotle's phrase, not an arithmetic average, not some universal number you can calculate. It shifts depending on your specific circumstances, your responsibilities, your capacities.
Truthfulness, the mean between boastfulness and self-deprecation. The boastful person exaggerates their qualities. The self-deprecating person denies them. The truthful person simply represents themselves accurately.
And notice how rare that actually is. Think about how many social situations push you toward one extreme or the other. Job interviews push toward boasting. British culture sometimes pushes toward playing things down. The truthful person resists both pressures and simply says, "What's real?"
Wittiness. This one surprises people. Aristotle thought there was a virtue of humor, the mean between buffoonery and boorishness. The buffoon will say anything for a laugh, regardless of who gets hurt. The bore has no sense of humor at all and makes everyone uncomfortable at dinner. The witty person knows what's funny, when it's funny, and with whom.
I love that example because it shows how contextual the mean always is. A joke that's perfect at a pub with friends might be completely wrong at a memorial service. Same joke, different mean.
And temperance. The relationship with pleasure, not the person who denies all pleasure because Aristotle thought that was a form of failure too, and not the person enslaved by every appetite. The temperate person can enjoy pleasure fully without being controlled by it.
Which is such a different message from what most people expect from ancient philosophy. Aristotle isn't telling you to suppress your desires, he's telling you to enjoy things in the right measure. Good food, good wine, good company. All of these are part of the flourishing life. The question is always proportion.
And then there's justice, which Aristotle treats differently from the other virtues because it's inherently about relationship. Justice means giving what is due. Not too much, not too little, but what is due to this particular person in this particular circumstance.
Which is why justice is so difficult. It requires you to see people clearly, to understand what they have earned, what they need, what the situation demands. And again, no formula captures that. It requires phronesis, practical wisdom developed through years of attentive living. Now, here's something people miss about phronesis. It's not innate. You're not born with it.
It develops through experience, which is actually quite hopeful if you think about it.
Aristotle compares it to craft. A carpenter doesn't learn to build by reading about carpentry. She learns by building things, making mistakes, noticing what works, adjusting. Over time, she develops an intuitive sense for how wood behaves, what a structure needs, when something is just not right.
And moral wisdom works the same way. You develop good judgment by making decisions, reflecting on what happened, adjusting your approach. There's no shortcut.
Which is why Aristotle says young people can be brilliant at mathematics, but they can't yet be practically wise. Mathematics doesn't require life experience. Wisdom does.
He also says something crucial about how we develop virtue. We become courageous by doing courageous things. We become generous by practicing generosity. We become just by acting justly. It's not that you become virtuous and then act well. You act well repeatedly and virtue forms in you.
Hexis. That's his term. A settled disposition that forms through repeated practice. Like a path worn into a hillside. Each time you walk it, the groove deepens.
Which means virtue is essentially a set of habits, but not mechanical habits. Intelligent, responsive, context-sensitive habits. The kind that let you walk into a new situation and feel, almost in your bones, what this moment requires.
And notice the body language there. Feel in your bones. This isn't purely intellectual. Aristotle understood that practical wisdom involves your whole being. Your perception, your emotions, your physical intuitions. Not just your rational analysis.
This is where the three dimensions come together so naturally. In our work with students at Trikala, we engage with Aristotle's ethics directly. That's the philosophical dimension. But reading the ethics won't make you virtuous any more than reading a cookbook will make you a chef. You need the psychological practices for recognizing your own patterns and tendencies. And you need the embodied work because your body carries wisdom that your mind doesn't always access.
Your body knows when something is off before your mind catches up. That tension in your shoulders when you're overcommitting. That hollow feeling in your chest when you're holding back something that needs to be said. Those are signals about where the mean actually is.
And this is where Aristotle parts company with his teacher, Plato. Plato distrusted the body. He saw it as a kind of prison for the soul, dragging us down toward appetite and confusion. The whole project of Platonic philosophy is to rise above the body into pure reason.
But Aristotle says no. The body is part of the picture. The emotions are part of the picture. A courageous person doesn't just think courageous thoughts. They feel appropriate fear in their gut, and they act anyway. The feeling is essential to the virtue.
Which means developing virtue is partly a physical project. You're training your body to respond differently, training your nervous system to recognize situations more quickly, training your felt sense to become more refined.
Think about someone learning to cook. At first, they follow the recipe mechanically, 2 teaspoons of salt, but eventually they develop a palate. They taste as they go. They can feel when something needs more acidity, more heat, more time. That knowing lives in the body, not just the mind.
Moral wisdom works the same way. You develop a palate for situations. You can feel when a conversation needs more honesty, when a person needs more space, when a project needs more attention. That feeling is phronesis operating through your whole being.
And developing sensitivity to those signals is part of the practice. The Aristotelian pillar in our tradition isn't just philosophical study, it's learning to read your own instrument, learning to notice when you're sharp or flat. The physical practices train your body to become a better sensing organ for ethical reality.
That's such an important point, because most people think ethics is purely a thinking exercise. Work out the right principles and apply them. Aristotle is saying it's more like learning to dance. You can read about dancing all you like. At some point, your body has to learn the steps.
The student who tends toward recklessness needs different work from the student who tends toward timidity. And the guide's role is to help each person find their particular mean, not a universal standard, their mean, in their life, with their specific tendencies. Now, one of the most remarkable things about the golden mean is that Aristotle wasn't the only one who noticed it.
Not even close. And the parallels are extraordinary when you actually look at them.
The Buddha, working independently in India roughly around the same era, arrived at something remarkably similar: the Middle Way.
Which the Buddha discovered through his own extremes. He'd been Prince Siddhartha, living in absolute luxury, servants attending his every need, surrounded by beauty, shielded from all suffering. Then he became an ascetic, nearly starving himself to death, sleeping on thorns, refusing all comfort. 6 years of that. And neither extreme brought liberation. And in that recognition, sitting under the Bodhi tree, with a body that was broken from austerity, the Middle Way was born.
But there's an important difference in emphasis. Aristotle's mean is about flourishing, living the best possible human life, eudaimonia. The Buddha's Middle Way is about liberation from suffering, nibbana. Aristotle wants you to live magnificently within the world. The Buddha wants you to find freedom from the world's grip on your consciousness.
Same structure, different destination, or perhaps the same destination approach from different angles. Because when you look at someone who's genuinely flourishing in the Aristotelian sense, and someone who's genuinely liberated in the Buddhist sense, they look remarkably similar in practice. Both are present, both respond appropriately, both are free from the tyranny of their own reactivity.
And in China, Confucius was teaching the Zhongyong, often translated as the doctrine of the mean, the idea that the exemplary person maintains equilibrium and harmony in all things.
The Zhongyong actually says something beautiful, that before feelings of pleasure, anger, sorrow, and joy are aroused, there is a state of equilibrium. When they are aroused and each attains its proper measure, there is harmony. Equilibrium is the great root. Harmony is the universal path.
Which maps almost perfectly onto Aristotle's language. The right feeling, in the right proportion, at the right time.
And then, in Taoism, a different flavor of the same insight. The Tao itself is about balance, yin and yang. Not as opposing forces fighting each other, but as complementary movements that generate all of reality. To live in accordance with the Tao is to find the natural balance in each moment, not forcing, not withdrawing, responding.
In Islamic philosophy, we find wasatiyyah. The Quran describes the Muslim community as an ummah of the Middle Way, a balanced nation. And this concept runs through Islamic jurisprudence, ethics, and spiritual practice.
Even in traditional medicine systems, Ayurveda classifies people by their dosha balance and treats illness as imbalance. You're not given the same prescription as everyone else. The physician studies your particular constitution and asks what's excessive and what's deficient in you. Traditional Chinese medicine works with qi and the principle that health is harmony. Disease comes from excess or deficiency. Too much heat, not enough moisture, too much activity, not enough rest. The treatment is always to restore the mean for this body, this person, this season.
Which is precisely what Aristotle is doing with ethics. He's diagnosing the moral constitution and asking what this particular soul needs more of and what it needs less of.
So when Aristotle articulates the doctrine of the mean, he's giving philosophical precision to something human beings seem to recognize across every culture and every era. There's something fundamental here, something the axial age thinkers all glimpsed from their different vantage points. We talked about this convergence back in episode 174, and it keeps showing up, pillar after pillar, independent traditions arriving at overlapping truths. Now let's bring this into the present, because I think the golden mean has never been more relevant, and here's why.
We live in an age of extremes, and not just political extremes, though those are obvious enough.
Dietary extremes. You're either doing strict carnivore or you're fully raw vegan. Exercise extremes. Either crushing yourself with high-intensity training 6 days a week or doing nothing at all. Productivity extremes. Hustle culture on one side, anti-work on the other. Information extremes. Either drowning in constant news consumption or deliberately ignoring everything happening in the world.
And here's what Aristotle would say about all of this. Both extremes are easier than the mean. It's actually less demanding to go all in on one thing than it is to find the appropriate measure.
That's a profound observation. Excess feels decisive. It feels like commitment. Deficiency feels safe. It feels like protection. The mean requires constant attention, constant recalibration, and that's genuinely harder.
Think about work. The workaholic has a simple strategy. Just do more, always more. The person who's given up has an equally simple strategy. Do less. Protect yourself. But the person trying to work with genuine excellence, they have to figure out every single day how much is enough, when to push and when to rest, when the project needs more attention and when it needs to be released.
My friend with the cold plunges, she'd found it easier to go extreme than to do the genuinely hard work of asking, what does my particular body actually need right now?
Because the extreme gives you certainty. It gives you rules to follow. It gives you an identity. I'm the person who does this. The mean asks you to stay uncertain, responsive, attentive.
Which requires a kind of inner stability that most people haven't developed yet. And that's where practice comes in. Real practice, not another optimization protocol. Practice in the Aristotelian sense. Repeated engagement with your own life, your own tendencies, your own moments of excess and deficiency.
And this applies to the emotional world too. Think about anger. Aristotle doesn't say anger is bad. He says there's a virtue of appropriate anger. The person who never gets angry when injustice occurs is morally deficient. The person who rages at everything is excessive. The virtuous person feels anger about the right things, in the right measure, and channels it into right action.
That's so countercultural right now. We are either told to suppress anger entirely, which is the wellness culture approach, or we see people weaponizing their anger online with no restraint at all.
Two extremes. And the mean, as always, is harder than either one. Feel the anger, understand it, direct it appropriately. That takes real skill.
The same goes for compassion, actually. Too little compassion, and you become cold, disconnected, unable to respond to others' pain. Too much, and you absorb everyone's suffering until you're burned out and useless.
Every therapist knows this. Every nurse, every teacher, every parent. The question is never whether to care. The question is how to care in a way that's sustainable and actually helpful. And that's a mean-finding exercise.
Aristotle himself offers a practical technique for this. He says, lean against your natural tendency. If you tend toward cowardice, practice moving slightly toward boldness. If you tend toward recklessness, practice moving slightly toward caution. You probably won't overshoot. You'll land closer to the mean. It's like tuning a stringed instrument. If the string is flat, you tighten it. If it's sharp, you loosen it. You're always adjusting, always listening for the right pitch.
And nobody else can tune your instrument for you. That's why this work requires a relationship. A guide who knows your tendencies, your blind spots, your particular patterns.
Which is exactly as Aristotle intended. And so, where does this leave us?
With an uncomfortable truth, I think. The good life is harder than either excess or deficiency. It requires sustained attention, developed wisdom, and the humility to keep adjusting.
Aristotle never promised it would be easy. He promised it would be worthwhile.
He uses this image of an archer aiming at a target. Virtue is like hitting the bullseye. You can miss in an infinite number of ways. Too high, too low, too far left, too far right. But there's only one point that's exactly right.
And hitting it consistently, that takes practice. Years of practice, a whole life of practice.
Which is why he says at the beginning of the Ethics that this is not a course for young people looking for quick answers. It's a study for people who've lived enough to know that life is complex, and that simple rules don't capture that complexity.
The golden mean isn't a destination you arrive at. It's a practice you return to. Every morning, every decision, every interaction. What does this moment need from me? Not too much, not too little, just Right.
And when you get it right, even for a moment, not because someone told you, because something in you recognizes it, this is the right response. This is what the situation actually needed. There's a kind of click, like a note finding its pitch, like a key turning in a lock it was made for.
That recognition, that quiet inner knowing, that's phronesis. And developing it might be the most important work any of us ever do.
Aristotle called it the ergon, the function, the unique work of being human. Not just thinking, not just surviving, but living with the kind of excellence that only a fully awake, fully integrated human being can achieve.
And he spent an entire life arguing that this isn't reserved for the extraordinary few. It's available to anyone willing to practice, to pay attention, to keep adjusting.
Before we wrap up, we've had some wonderful emails come in recently. Shall we get to a few?
First one is from Tomasz in Krakow. He's writing about our Beginner's Mind episode from a few weeks back. He says, "You talked about how expertise creates blindness. I'm a surgeon, and this unsettled me. In my profession, expertise is what keeps patients alive. Am I supposed to forget what I know before I operate? I'd end up in prison for malpractice."
Tomasz, that's such a good challenge. And no, obviously not. Suzuki's teaching about beginner's mind isn't about discarding expertise. It's about not letting your expertise prevent you from seeing what's actually in front of you.
Think about it this way. The most dangerous surgeon isn't the inexperienced one. It's the experienced one who assumes they already know what they'll find before they open up the patient. Because bodies surprise you. Complications arise that textbooks didn't cover.
Beginner's mind in surgery would mean bringing your 20 years of skill to the table while remaining genuinely attentive to this particular patient, this particular moment. Not assuming. Staying alert.
The expertise is your foundation. Beginner's mind is your openness built on that foundation. You need both.
Some of the best surgical training programs now emphasize exactly this: situational awareness, being fully present rather than operating on autopilot. That's beginner's mind wearing scrubs.
Great question, Tomasz.
Next one. Amara in Lagos, responding to the Hermetic Tradition episode, number 194. She writes, "You mentioned that Hermetic ideas influenced the scientific revolution, but science seems completely opposed to esoteric thinking now. Did something go wrong? Did science forget where it came from?"
Oh, that's a big question.
It is. And yes, in a sense, something did happen. The early scientists, Newton, Kepler, Boyle, they saw no contradiction between investigating nature empirically and believing that nature was saturated with spiritual meaning. Studying the cosmos was, for them, a sacred act.
The split happened gradually. As science produced more and more practical results, the metaphysical framework fell away. You didn't need, as above, so below, to build a steam engine. So the spiritual dimension got quietly dropped.
But that spiritual dimension was what motivated the inquiry in the first place. Strip away the sense that nature is meaningful, and science becomes purely instrumental. Powerful, but without direction.
Which is arguably where we find ourselves now. Extraordinary technical capacity, very little wisdom about how to use it, with more of a capitalist mindset.
Great observation, Amara.
Last one, quick one from James in Edinburgh. He's been thinking about the Gilgamesh episode, number 190. He asks, is there a difference between accepting failure and giving up?
Oh, that's sharp. And yes, a world of difference. Gilgamesh doesn't give up. He pursues immortality with everything he has. He fights, he travels, he suffers. But when the serpent steals the plant of youth, he doesn't collapse into despair. He returns home. He looks at the walls of Uruk that he built, and he finds meaning in what he created rather than in what he couldn't achieve.
Accepting failure is what happens after you've given your full effort. Giving up is what happens before you've really tried. Gilgamesh earned his acceptance because he held nothing back.
It's the difference between wisdom and resignation. And honestly, learning to tell those two apart might be one of life's most important skills.
Keep the emails coming, everyone. podcast@maaoot.org. Before we go, a quick word. If this podcast has meant something to you, if it's given you something to think about or changed how you approach your own life, one of the most helpful things you can do is leave a review.
It sounds small, but for a podcast like ours, without advertising, without a marketing team, your reviews are how new listeners find us.
Share an episode with someone who'd connect with it. Rate the show. Write a few words. It genuinely makes a difference. You know what struck me most today?
Tell me.
That the golden mean is essentially a teaching about paying attention, not following a program, not optimizing, just paying very close attention to what this moment actually requires,
And trusting that with enough practice, you'll get better at seeing it.
which is what all of this work comes down to, isn't it? Not perfection, not arriving somewhere, just getting incrementally better at seeing clearly and responding wisely.
If anything we discussed today raised questions for you, or if you want to push back on something, we'd love to hear it. Podcast@maaoot.org.
That's podcast at maaoot.org.
Ab immemorabile. From time beyond memory,
The mean is always moving.
and the practice never stops.
Keep paying attention.
Keep adjusting.